Well, welcome, Don Felder, and congratulations on the release of your new album, Road to Forever. I know this was a long journey, and it's been well worth the wait. So personally, what does this album represent to you?
Well, it's really stories and experiences that I went through in my life. When I wrote my autobiography, Heaven and Hell, and published it in 2008, I went back and reflected on a lot of experiences that I'd gone through throughout the course of my life. And while I was writing that text for that book, I also would take those ideas and those feelings that went along with those experiences, like leaving the Eagles and having that fall from love, fall from grace there. And I'd go in the studio and I'd write songs about those experiences. I actually wrote about 26 songs in a period of about a year and a half. Chose the 16 songs that I thought were the best songs, and then went in and recorded and finished those songs, and wound up having to sub out or cull out 4 of the songs to wind up with 12 on the CD. They're all kind of human experiences that we've all shared, right. Kind of encapsulated in these songs.
So you've had, time to sort of craft your vision for this record. Creatively, what was your goal? Like, what kind of record did you want to make?
Well, it was somewhat cathartic in the sense that, like I said, when I was going through that period of my life when I had left the Eagles, I went through a divorce with my wife of 29-year marriage. And so I wanted to really kind of explore all the possibilities emotionally in music of all the things that I was feeling and going through at the time. A song on there called I Believe, and it's about people having been injured or wounded through love and getting to a point where you try to find the strength to take the plunge, the leap of faith again, to believe in love, that it's worth the challenge to try to do that and expose yourself again to have the joy of a love relationship again. There's some songs on there about money, the greed and corruption and attitudes that go along with money, that obviously it can do a lot of good in the world, help children's research centers for hospitals and take people out of poverty and stuff, but there's a lot of negative things that go along with it, that I personally experienced in my life. There's a song on there called Give My Life that's about everybody going through life, and at some point you have to find something that you feel so passionate about that you want to give your life to. For me, it's been music since I was 10 years old, and I grew up in really kind of impoverished circumstances, so I really had nothing to lose, so I could try to do anything I wanted to in life and had nothing to lose if I failed. But I just loved playing music and gave my life to playing music with a passion. And I don't know if it's that 10,000 hour thing. For me, it's probably about 30,000 hours that I've invested in it. But most of the songs on there have experiences that I've gone through that I think are kind of part of the human condition that we all experience at one time or another. And real art to me, whether it's painting or music or drama or literature, really touches people through being able to share a common experience in life that people can understand and feel and relate to. And that was the object in trying to do these songs on this CD.
Now, musically, you are joined by some of the most talented musicians on the planet on this record. So what does it mean to have some of these guys like Leland Sklar and Lenny Castro join you in bringing this record to life?
Well, it was really a very kind of personal, cathartic experience to write these songs and then want to go in the studio and produce them. So I really chose people that I thought were, first of all, good friends and would understand what the songs were about and be empathetic and understand that the feelings that needed to go into these songs really had to be appropriate to what the message was in the song. So I called on a lot of my good friends, like Crosby, Stills, and Nash came in and sang harmony on Fall from the Grace of Love. We had a long talk about that before we sang it and did the vocal arrangements. Tommy Shaw, great lead singer and guitar player and amazing writer for the band Styx. Good friend of mine. We've done a lot of charity work together, played together, had dinner together, just good friends. I was writing the lyrics for the song Wash Away. and I had some lyrics. I just wasn't really completely sold on them, so I called Tommy, and he just happened to be in town for that week, and I said, come on over and help me with some lyrics on this. So we sat down and talked about the idea of what the song was about, wrote some lyrics, and I set up a mic in my studio, and I said, before you leave, you have to sing background on this. So he sang the harmonies with me on the background choruses for that. Randy Jackson, everybody knows Randy is the dog dude on American Idol as a judge, but he's an amazing bass player, just a killer bass player. So I had this song called Someday. It's kind of an optimistic hope that someday we'll find a love together. And I wanted the chorus as kind of a power ballad. I wanted it to be something that was played with a lot of strength and intensity, and Randy was the perfect musician. So I called Randy up. He came over and played on it. Steve Lukather, who's one of the funniest guys in the world to be in the studio with. He's actually the only guitar player that I invited in to play on the record on this one song.
He was worthy. He was worthy of.
Yeah, absolutely. So he came in and played on this one song called "Road to Forever," and we just had such a great time. It was a pleasure to be in the studio with a lot of really good friends, making songs that were so personal to me and having a great time without any drama. As you probably know, the history of the studio with the Eagles, it was always drama all day long. So it was a pleasure to be in the studio writing and recording songs without the drama that so typically used to go along with that experience.
Right. You have such a rich history, and there are so many stories, and you've put them into a book, in fact. There's sort of a new generation of bands and artists out there who really hold that mid-70s California sound as a template to try to emulate. Not to dwell too much on the past, but just maybe describe what resonates to you the most from when you finally arrived in California in the 70s, and there was a scene, there was a songwriter scene there was a music scene happening there. What sort of resonates with you the most from that time period?
Well, my template or trailblazer for myself personally was Stephen Stills. He and I had a band together in Florida when we were 15. Stephen moved from Florida to California, and I found this other guitar player, Bernie Ledden, who actually was one of the founding members of the Eagles, who was in a band with me. I remember waking up one day and reaching over and turning on the radio and hearing this guy singing sounded really familiar. I said, I know who that is. Who is that? And it was Stills singing For What It's Worth with Buffalo Springfield. So I realized that in Gainesville there was no music business whatsoever, other than playing in bars in Daytona during the summer, that I really needed to make a move out of that area. And then when Bernie left, he moved back to California and wound up in the Flying Burrito Brothers. And so I had a couple of people that had sort of gone out there that I knew and had basically the same kind of talents as far as singing and playing and writing that I had. So eventually, after much coaxing from Bernie, I packed up all the possessions I owned in a nice little U-Haul trailer and drove across the country to California and just kind of threw my fate to the wind there. But when I first got there, there was definitely a scene going on between writers like J.D., Henley, Joni Mitchell, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. All the music that was going on there were people that could write, sing, and play. What a novel idea for an artist to be able to write his own song, sing well enough, and play. And so when the band, the Eagles, came together, there was an unusual number of people in one band that could do all three things. There was 5 singers, there were 5 great players, 5 writers, so we had an abundance of talent in one room to call on, to make records and to tour with and stuff. So I was just impressed at how much energy there was in California in those days, that was not just in one group, but in the whole scene that was there. Everybody was out playing and singing and writing and recording together. I probably recorded on more records in the 70s than I have throughout my whole career. I wound up on Bee Gees records and Michael Jackson records and Diana Ross records and Bob Seger records and all the people that were out there, Joni Mitchell records, everybody that was out there. We just would play together and wind up in the studio working on a song together. So it was a really very exciting, kind of enthusiastic time for music in that era, and everybody just shared their experiences and their knowledge and their songs with each other.
Right. Now I must ask you about Hotel California. It's such a monumental song. It's recognized around the world. Do you recall the inspiration behind the music when you picked out those chords and started crafting that piece of music?
Yeah, I do. It was a kind of a really nice, beautiful, warm summer day. I was sitting on a couch in a rented house in Malibu. I'd just gotten some money and I'd moved from Topanga onto the beach, mainly because we had a couple of little kids and there were rattlesnakes everywhere in the Topanga Mountains. And my wife said, "We're moving out of here. We're moving to the beach. There's no rattlesnakes." So we moved down to the beach, sitting on this couch, just playing guitar, diddling around, looking out, watching the California sun kind of sparkle on the ocean. And my two little kids were playing in the sand by this swing set we had. And out came that chord progression. And so I played it 4 or 5 times over and over, and then I ran in my back bedroom where I had a temporary studio set up, an old reel-to-reel tape recorder, and I recorded it 4 or 5 times and shut it off, and then went back out and played with my kids. And when we were compiling song ideas for the Hotel California record, what was going to be the Hotel California record, I had about 16 or 17 song ideas that I'd made demos of. And one of them was that piece of music of me just playing an acoustic 12-string guitar that I had recorded. And I said, I'm going to finish this. So I put a bass track on it and a drum machine track on it and played pretty much the guitars like you hear on the record today on the ending, with the exception of a few Joe Walsh's curveballs that were thrown in the end for the solo there, which is just, that's Joe,
Right.
And so I put all those songs on a cassette, if anybody remembers what a cassette tape is, and I made copies and gave one to Don Henley, Glenn Fry, Joe Walsh, and Randy Meisner, who was the bass player at the time, and said, if anybody hears anything on this tape that you want to finish writing, let's get together and work on it. So a couple of days later, Henley called me and said, I like that song. It sounds kind of like a Mexican reggae song or bolero. I knew which track it was because the other songs on there had no similarity to a Mexican reggae. So we wound up going into the studio, recording the whole song in its entirety in the original key that I wrote it in, which was E minor. As a guitar player, you probably know. That's a nice, big, full guitar chord. And so when Don set up a mic in the studio and went out to sing the lyrics that he had come up with, he sounded like Barry Gibb. He was singing in this real high falsetto voice, and I said, that's not right. We've got to change this key. We've got to lower the key. So I took an acoustic guitar and went out in the studio and sat with him and figured out that instead of E minor, it should be B minor. So, which is not a particularly great guitar key. So we re-recorded the entire basic track in B minor in the key that he could sing it in, and produced the song. And when it was over, the record company had been pounding on the door, clamoring for this new Eagles record, because we were coming off One of These Nights, which was a very successful record. So finally we let him in and we had a playback party for him. And when we played the tape, the master tape, and it finished at Hotel California, Henley turned around and said, that's going to be our single. And I went, you know what? That's the wrong format. For the 70s, AM radio was like rock and roll, or it was a drippy ballad, or you had to dance to it or something. It had to be 3 minutes and 30 seconds long. The introduction had to be less than 30 seconds, so the disc jockey didn't have to talk a long time before the vocals started. And Hotel California is 6.5 minutes long. It's a full minute before the vocals start. You can't really dance to it. It stops in the middle, the drums stop in the middle, and then it's got this 2-minute guitar solo on the end of it. It was just the wrong format. So I said, Don, I think you're making a big mistake. I don't think this should be our next single. He went, nope, that's going to be our single. So I've never been so delighted to be so wrong in my life that when it was released, it was so successful,
Yeah, it's a great story. Last year, when we met, you had just played at the United Nations with Robin, your producer, and he talked a bit about the reaction of people who don't even speak English when they hear the opening notes of that song. How does it feel as a musician to have that power to move people wherever they might come from?
Well, I think musically it's a unique piece of music. It's sort of like unlike any other form of music. But the concept lyrically of Hotel California was something that nobody in the Eagles was from California. We all drove into California on Route 66 at night. And when you're driving in at night through the desert, you could see the lights of Los Angeles hovering for about 100 miles away. And as you're driving in, you have all these visions that we've all been ingrained with, of palm trees and beaches and the stars on Hollywood Boulevard and movie stars and all that glamour that's associated with Hollywood and California. So we decided to take that concept and write it into the lyrics of a song, and it happened to be on top of the music bed that I had written for the song. So I think the concept, when people hear that, they have a lot of images that they've mustered through merchandising and advertising and television of what California is like, that they associate with that song. So when they hear it, all those other images, whether they don't even speak English, when they hear Hotel California, all those thoughts come into mind, much like we experienced when we were driving in there. And it was a fascinating experience to walk out in front of the UN, and there's hundreds of people there from all over the world that don't speak English, that when I played that, they had just a really overwhelming response to that song. And it was delightful to know that something you've done at one point in your life really has touched a lot of people worldwide, and that it's nice to be a classic, I guess, at some point, you know.
Well, now you have some new classics to unveil to the world, so have a great time doing that. And thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
All right.
Thank you. All right.